Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug McKenzie, and on today's session, we're going to be looking at how you can take full advantage of an FPGA and look at the speed advancements when it comes to your trading algorithms. And joining me today, I have three gentlemen who are right at the heart of that topic. First up, we have Dan Brown, who is over at CISCO. Dan, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much. Yeah,
amazing. Dan, for our audience, can you tell us a bit more about your role over at CISCO, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm a technical solutions architect as part of the ultra-low latency team here at CISCO. So we're responsible for anything that's related to the nanosecond.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah,
that's even lower than that.
Well, that's exactly what we've got you guys on today's panel, because I think we're going to be talking about speeds that are absolutely infinitesimal. It's going to be absolutely incredible. And also joining us is Mike Skory, who's based out of Chicago. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. How are you here today?
I'm doing wonderful, Doug. Thank you very much.
Amazing. And could you tell us a bit more about your role too, please?
I am a ultra latency specialist. Located in Chicago, covering the Midwest and the other half of the US on the West Coast. So
incredible. Thank you so much, Mike. And also Bob DiPietro. Bob, thank you as well for joining us here today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. Pleasure to be here. And thank you, Doug.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you. And Bob, also for our audience, could you give a brief introduction to yourself and your role too?
Sure. Yeah, I'm an ultra low latency technical solutions architect based in Chicago, and specialty with smart NICs and kernel bypass, as well as switching. So experience with FPGAs and tool chain development of for ultra low latency and for finance markets.
Incredible. Yeah. And the angle of today's discussion is really going to be what that technology can really do for financial organizations. And I'm really excited for someone who speaks with a lot of financial organizations on a day-to-day basis to be able to get some of those use cases out and see what that technology is going to provide. So to kick things off, Dan, if I could come to you, in your own words, before programmable NICs, what did the finance industry actually have to settle for? And was it really at a point where they would have to implement new hardware if a change was needed, which for risk-averse financial organizations, I can imagine, that must have been quite a headache, right?
Yeah, sure. So, the latency race started in around 2007. I think ever since then, basically people have been building technology or infrastructure to basically reduce the length of time it takes to trade on exchanges. So, prior to having programmable NICs, they were basically using standard off-the-shelf hardware. There'd be some micro companies that would try and develop their own infrastructure and develop their own programming systems. And I think Bob was actually doing some of that as well back in the day. To build high performance NIC distribution platforms. Yeah. So prior to that, that's kind of what things have been doing. But as throughout today's webinar, I guess we're going to talk about the advancements of that.
Yeah, exactly. And before we do, Bob, I've got to get that perspective as well. What was that kind of ecosystem that Dan was mentioning like, really?
It was primarily based on NICs, right? And everything could go back to a processor. The FPGAs they've evolved over the last maybe 10 years, right? But they weren't really in the play then. And now, they are, of course. But it was basically reducing the latency any way you could, all the way, up to the processor and the CPU and in the processing of that, and using kernel bypass. So all host-based, and we're talking about overclocking machines, so that you could get the faster latency, the faster instructions, and going directly to the user space. So it was mainly based in the host. And so now with the advancements of FPGA, it can be offloaded and you can program down into the FPGA and avoid the whole chain up to the host and back. But you can also use the host in conjunction. And so that's also too, the bifurcated stack, where I don't have to build an entire TCP engine inside the FPGA, which can be a difficult problem and use a lot of resources. So we've evolved from being all host based and even being just kernel based and kernel based was much slower as well. So there's been a whole evolution, and all of it's been to reduce the latency, right? And and even down to the instruction set and caching and how cache coherency is done. There's been a lot of different advances. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, before I come to you, Mike, for our next question, Dan, I'm interested, before we kind of continue any further, to kind of understand Cisco's programmable NIC offering.
Yeah, so we've got a few different ranges of NICs that we've got available here at Cisco. So we've got, we've got switches, we've got NICs. The NICs themselves, we've got the X25 and X100. These, we would classify these as sort of our drop-in NICs. They can basically be used to accelerate any piece of software. As Bob mentioned a moment ago, you can apply our kernel bypass stack to that and basically get yourself into the sub-microsecond range quite easily for near enough any application. And the primary use case for those NICs has been in financial services for trading, but they also do have applications outside of that as well. Yeah. Alongside the standard drop-in NICs, we've got the ones that would probably be more focused towards our FPGA development users. So we've got a couple of cards, one of which is based on the Vertex UltraScale 5P, and one that's on the VU9P as well. And they're both from Xilinx. They can basically work in conjunction with our FDK, which is our firmware development kit, which is a full suite of tools that you can use to start doing development on FPGA cards. So you can sort of go from knowing, not too much about FPGAs, maybe knowing, how to program in Verilog or VHDL, but moving towards a financial service package or being able to actually start trading on the exchanges relatively easy with our FDK. So they're our two main NIC lineups.
Incredible. Now, Mike, with that in mind, then, what can your programmable NIC offering do for traders and financial institutions in particular then?
Well, it really gives them the flexibility to put their logic, and this is all about time to market, in an expeditious manner, complementing everything that so far that Dan and also Bob have said. So tied with our FDK, which also has extensions out from the Xilinx Bravado tool set, it allows the customers the flexibility and creativity to meet their specific business objectives or primarily their trading initiatives.
Yeah, and with that, thinking of those initiatives and really what their aims to be, and being able to offer that flexibility in an industry that's so well regulated, Mike, as finance, and with bottom lines coming down to, for instance, picoseconds. I'm interested in your product offering and kind of how it differentiates from others when we are talking about speeds of that level and that almost magnitude, I want to say, but it's almost the opposite.
It's primarily in the FDK and allows them the tool sets that actually enhances it, so it reduces their time to market so they can focus primarily on their logic.
Yeah, okay.
That is the key.
Sure.
To it all.
Yeah. Now, one incredible aspect of the SpeedGrade 3 card, as you mentioned, is the FDK. And Dan, I know Mike has obviously brought up some of that just now, but looking at the firmware the development side of things, what can that actually bring out in the future? If it's going to be huge now for a lot of organizations being able to open up that creativity, but going forward, why is that so critical?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of different speed grades that are available within FPGAs. So we have the VU9P, which we've just started offering the SpeedGrade 3 version of that. So what that actually gives us the capability of doing is reducing the compile time of our customers' trading strategies. So what does that actually mean in terms of use cases in the markets? Well, so you compile an FPGA or a firmware image, and basically you deploy that onto a card in order for that to basically start trading on the exchange. However, what people like to do is they like to change how the market is interpreting data. They need to be able to change the way that the market is being seen, or they need to change maybe some of the parameters. But because this is done inside of an FPGA and it's not done in software, it's not easy to just change those values. So what they do is they recreate the FPGA image on the fly and then redeploy that directly onto the card in order for that to basically be able to trade onto the exchange without having any downtime or going against the strategy that they might actually be working towards. So, it reduces the length of time to deploy and compile an image, and also allows them to stay in the market a lot quicker.
Brilliant. Now, with that in mind, then Bob, as well, looking at that reducing in time to market and looking at accelerating operations for these large-scale institutions, does the framework enable you to accelerate operations over a typical processor, even though the processor might have a higher clock speed?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to look at it as latency, right? So now you can process streams, and you can make custom code, custom RTL to process streams in the FPGA. You don't have to go back to the host and use a general purpose processor. You can make your own basically logic that's hardware to process streams. And that's very, very, very low latency, very powerful, because much faster than you could do it if you went to the CPU. At the same time, it's a little bit harder to change, as Dan mentioned, because you have to recompile an image, and you have to make these bit images. But now it's faster to do that. So like you could change your code on the host much easier, right? I can compile C code or whatever, C++, whatever I'm writing there. But compiling on FPGA is a little bit longer. Now I have a easier way to compile and compile for the FPGA for the V9P, and with the speed grade, it's going to meet timing, and that's also a challenge. Like in the design, there's regions on an FPGA where I might place logic, or the tools do it. The Vivado tool for Xilinx places logic places, and now I have. It's going to be easy for it to meet timing. There's sometimes you have a design where, because it's algorithmic in how it places logic on the FPGA. So sometimes you might have a design which has a hard time meeting the timing. It's just placing things where it can't meet the timing. Well, the speed grade 3 allows those designs to meet timing easier, right? And it might actually, in some cases, depending on your mileage may vary, speed up the actual design. Speed up the design because there's less cycles between gates. The clocks are tighter between clock domains. So you might have some speed up of your actual design, as well as being able to compile faster.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, that just sounds like a massive knock-on positive for the developers, Mike. And with that in mind, then, so for instance, would it be fair to say that for the uninitiated, we were looking, traders were looking at maybe changing their algorithms maybe once a day? How many changes are we looking at nowadays with the speed grade 3?
Well, with the speed grade 3, it's as Bob just mentioned, it's about creating more margin for the ability to do the compiling. So they have more margin, so that when they do the compile, they can do it. Gives them the ability to react in real time, versus in the past, it would be a little tricky, because if you're off just a little bit, you could brick the whole entire thing. In this case, this allows you the margin, so then you can compile it, you can take sections of your code, so you can manipulate that, and then with the tool set, it will then pinpoint it, because just imagine it's just layers and layers of circuit boards, and then gets the timing perfect, and then boom, you send it off, and there you go. So it allows you to really react to the changes in the market. And the better you are, the faster you are, and what we're giving them is the platform to do so. With the speed grade 3.
It's incredible. And as I brought up earlier in the conversation, we are talking about such a well-regulated industry, Mike. And with that in mind, being able to change to market fluctuations and not get caught out, I guess that not only does that have a business use case, but also a use case when it comes to compliance and reducing risk. Because am I correct in thinking that if you're caught out, the penalties are quite severe?
Well, when you talk about risk, it's based on their whole individual traders or hedge fund or high frequency trading environment and their determination of risk. So does it meet their risk and requirements, their profitability, their loss? And within that, this provides them that flexibility to react accordingly to the market change. The biggest thing here is, again, being able to react to changes in the market in real time. Not like an algorithm back in the day used to last maybe a month, 2 months. Now it can last hours sometimes when you need to make a change right away. This allows you to do that.
I think that's just, it just sounds like the whole industry has been waiting for this point, because the way that people interact with digital systems, it has to speed up. And Dan, for instance, you mentioned some of the time speeds that we're talking about when it in this industry, it's gone to absolute, picoseconds. So with that in the future then, Dan, I know you did bring it up earlier in the conversation slightly, but on the business side then, going forward, we've kind of talked on about the knock-on effect this is going to have to being able to pivot quicker, but on a kind of like holistic point of view, or a top-down point of view, what does this mean on a business side going forward for the companies that embrace this technology?
Yeah, so it's a very good point, Doug. So basically what we're noticing is a lot more people are moving away from having solely software applications, and they're finding ways to take that software and deploy it inside of hardware. So here at CISCO, the way we're trying to embrace that, or embrace the future with those customers, is we're making sure that anything's part of our ultra-low latency lineup is going to be FPGA enabled. Alongside that, with our SDK, we can actually support the unlocking of all of our devices so that people can put their own strategic components inside of those. So we do it not just on our NIC cards, we actually have that capability across all of our whole switch lineup as well. So we're here to embrace our customers' needs as they move towards a FPGA driven journey or a hardware driven journey. So the way I see this sort of moving forward is, using high level synthesizers, so the conversion of software applications into hardware. I think that's going to become a more and more of a day-to-day activity, and I think that that's going to be introduced into a lot of our customers' software development life cycles, as well as their strategic operations. So that's the way I see things going from a business perspective.
Yeah. And Bob, if I could come to you as well, and because one thing we haven't really been looking at is the chip, and Mike as well, if you've got input on this as well, the Xilinx chip within the card, and I'm interested to see what that specifically brings to the card.
So, I mean, to the card, it's programmability, obviously, and the other, there's a couple things. Many lanes, right? So 16 ports of high speed of 10 gigabits. So many lanes in a double density connector. So and so that solves, or that problem is because a lot of customers want to react, or they want to react to things quickly. I mean, they need several lanes. They might have to go to different connections to different places because they need to react to something. And so that having all those connections is really powerful, as well as a lot of room for building their own logic, and now, and a way to build their own logic, and some actually memory onboard memory too. If you want to write memory that it's a little slower than the in memory on the chip, on the chip itself, that you can have memory there as well as DRAM, but you can have an external memory which you can put things in and do calculations, read memory or store things that I need to react to, right? And so it's all about getting that answer, getting that thing I need to trade with. And the FPGA, there's more than enough. There's a lot of programmability, and there's a lot of logic. These are 2.6 million system logic cells. So a big FPGA with a lot of connections provides them the ability to do a lot of work and a lot of computations, and then get that out in a very ultra low latency sub 100 or picoseconds, and sub 100 nanoseconds sort of.
That's absolutely incredible. But guys, thank you so much for your insights there. I think we've come to time. I just want to say a massive thank you to, it's such a practical industry, but the scale that these that we're operating at here is it's just so the technology really does seem to be quite pivotal. It's like a pivotal moment in the industry. So I just want to say thank you for your insight, and also thank you so much to our viewers for your time. You can catch the rest of the series over at ffnews.com, and of course YouTube, and especially LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the chat. Guys, once again, thank you very much, Bob, Dan, and Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Doug.